Every buyer walks into a conversation with the seller with the deal on their mind, the financials, the multiple, the terms, the actual price of the business, and whether or not all those numbers are going to hold up over time. What most buyers don't realize is that the seller is also running their own evaluation at the same time, and they're not running it on your credit score. I've talked to sellers that have turned down the highest offer. I've walked away from deals where I wasn't the right fit, even if I didn't know it at the time. And I've closed on a business where the sellers stayed invested in my success long after the deal closed. What separated those experiences wasn't the price. It was whether I understood what the seller was actually looking for. Most buyers never figure that out. Today, we're going to talk through what the sellers are looking for in a deal. Welcome to Business Buying for Financial Independence. I'm Tim Delaney, and I help young professionals buy small businesses so they can escape the 9-to-5 and take control of their time, income, and future. If that sounds like you, hit the subscribe button and let's get into it. Most buyers just think that a seller is only interested in the highest possible price that they can get for the business. And that might be true for a handful of sellers. Some people assume that the sellers are looking for the best terms, the best payouts, the best situation for their tax strategy. Again, those things might be true, but it's not the case with all sellers, or probably even the majority of sellers. For some sellers, that's what they're looking for. Most cash, fast as possible, cleanest, quickest closing timeline that they can get, and all their cash right up front. For others, they want a payout over a period of time. Maybe they don't like the idea of getting all the cash up front for tax reasons or for just cash flow management for their own personal lifestyle. They want payments over a long period of time. For other sellers, they may have built something and they know that it can be much bigger than it is, but they know that they're not the right person to take it there. So they're looking for that person that can escalate their business so they can be proud of it in the future as something that they started. Every seller has slightly different motivations as to why they're selling and to what they're looking for in a buyer. And knowing those things is a very integral part of getting the deal done. When you walk into that first conversation with a seller, or the second or third, and you're only focused on figuring out the numbers, figuring out the nuts and bolts of the deal, and not paying attention to what their motivations and what their interests are, you could be missing out on an amazing deal. For some sellers, their motivation is not necessarily just the price, not just the dollars. They have other things going on in their heads that they want to ensure. It might be employees, it might be customers, it might be vendors, it could be the real estate situation. It could be a number of different things. So when you walk in as a buyer, only focused on the P&L and the balance sheet and fail to ask the right questions early on, you could be turning yourself off to that seller. As an example, I want to share two different stories of sellers that I had dealt with personally, just to kind of give you an example of what that might look like. The first one was a pet store that I came close to buying early on in my search. We were negotiating, I liked the deal. It seemed to make sense. It was at a good location, but we were hung up on the numbers. It was the purchase price that I wasn't comfortable paying, and we kind of went back and forth on it. In retrospect, like thinking about that seller, I don't know that I conveyed to him enough of my care and love of animals. His motivation was finding somebody that cared about the pets, that cared about the animals, that was invested in the lifestyle of pets. I didn't have a pet at the time, and I think that kind of showed through. It wasn't necessarily that I didn't like animals, it's just I didn't have a pet. So I don't think I conveyed enough to him how much pets meant to me, or I don't know if I would have ever been able to. And that's where I use the price as an excuse to walk away, but he might have held firm because he knew I wasn't the right fit. Maybe if I had conveyed or shown a different personality or different perspective on pet ownership or on pets in general, maybe he would have come down a little bit more, or maybe I would have been willing to come up a little bit more. But in retrospect, looking back on that deal and on that negotiation over time, I've really kind of realized that the motivation for him was really finding somebody that was going to be an animal lover, be in there caring for the pets doing their best to match up the families with the pets and all that kind of thing. So it wasn't just about the dollars for him. It wasn't just that I wasn't willing to pay a little bit more for it. I think it was more about the fact that he was looking for the right person for that role, and I probably didn't fit the bill fully. Now compare that to the wine and liquor store that I bought. The couple that had owned it, they had bought it 20 years prior. In conversation, even in early conversations with them, they talked about their customers by name. They knew what their customers drank. They talked about them and treated them like they were neighbors and friends. And that's partially because they were. This was a local, small community, small town wine and liquor store where a lot of people knew each other. And the owners definitely had gotten to know and like and trust a lot of their customers over time, and the customers got to know them. They were looking for somebody that was going to be willing to carry on that legacy. There were pictures in the wine and liquor store of not even previous owners, but previous managers of the store that were staples in the community that had retired from there. One of them was a retired postmaster that came to work at the liquor store after he retired. Because it was such an integral staple of the community, the sellers wanted to be sure that whoever was taking over was going to take care of that relationship, to continue that legacy of the store and not just maximize profits and make radical changes overnight. That was probably more important to them than just the dollars and cents at the end of the day. And luckily for me, I conveyed that that's what I was going to do, even though I didn't live in that community. It was through conversations with them and the way I talked and the way I presented myself and the way I showed interest in the products and in the customers and in the employees that they had also developed a good relationship with over years. I sold myself to the sellers because I showed that I cared about their business and what they had built over 20 years of ownership from even tinier store than it was before they bought it. So understanding the motivations of the sellers and where they're coming from is an integral part in being able to close a deal. You want to be selling yourself to them from day one. You want to go into that first meeting asking questions, not necessarily about the P&L, but about the business, about their customers, about the employees, about their processes, about their story. What was their story? How did it fit? How did that business fit into their life? So that you can get a better understanding of who they are and what that business meant to them and what they might be looking for in a buyer. The thing that solidified for me that the sellers of the wine and liquor store cared more about the person than just the dollars is that even after I finished paying them off the seller financing portion of the store, they still expressed constant interest in how the business was doing, how the customers were doing, how the employees were doing. It didn't just disappear because they got paid out and they were done. Their involvement was constant. They constantly asked, they constantly showed up. Their true motivations continued to show through for years after I bought the business. Two different sellers, two different motivations. The pet store owner was looking for somebody that was passionate about the product, the service, the actual thing. Whereas the wine and liquor store owners didn't really care much about my interest in the wine and liquor. They wanted to know that I was going to carry out their legacy of caring for their customers and caring for their employees and being that community staple. Every motivation is a little bit different, and understanding that and figuring that out is very important. And it's not like either of them came out and said that, especially right away. It's more things that you kind of pick up on and you infer and you learn through careful conversations, asking good questions, and just being open to hearing what the seller has to say. This is a skill that a lot of buyers never really develop. It's tough. I'm guilty of it as well. I've called sellers and immediately start digging into the P&L, the balance sheet, the nuts and bolts of the business without really taking a step back and asking why they're selling, what they've done, what their proudest achievements have been in the business, what they don't like about the business. All those kinds of questions can help open up a thought process and get a deeper understanding of the seller's mindset. So it kind of comes down to three different things. Now that you understand that seller motivation is a very important part of the deal, step one, like I said, ask a lot of questions. Dig deep. Ask them all kinds of things about the business that are not finance related, that are not nuts and bolts of how the business operates. Ask them their story. Ask them what they like. Ask them what they don't like. Ask them about their employees. Show an interest in their story and their legacy and what they're looking for. Step 2, asking and getting specific and showing curiosity about the people involved in the business. Not just the employees, but also the customers and the vendors. Everybody that they touched and dealt with are important to them. The people that sold me the wine and liquor store had amazing relationships with not only their customers and their employees, but also with their vendors, their sales reps. Unfortunately, one of the owners just passed away recently. At his wake, this is 13 years after he sold the business to me, there were still a large number of sales reps from our vendors that showed up to that wake. That's how important these people were to each other's lives. So expressing curiosity about the people involved in the business or around the business, all of the stakeholders in the business, from vendors, customers, and employees, is a great way to help get a better understanding of the seller's mindset. And then the third thing is to be honest about who you are, to share your story, share who you are, what your thought process is, why you're drawn to this business. You don't need to get into, especially right away, you don't need to get into specifics about how you're going to change it and how you're going to make it better. In fact, probably suppress that for a little while. People like to hear that you have ambition, but they don't want to hear that you're going to come in tomorrow and completely gut everything they've done and start something different. So take a step back, be honest about who you are, where you come from, why you're interested, what makes you you, and how that fits into their particular business. That helps them get a better understanding, and through that process, they may open up even more and share some more insights that make it a better fit for you, or help reveal that this isn't the right fit for you because their motivations aren't aligned with who you are and what you want. So bringing that all together, not all sellers are the same. Not all of them are chasing the highest dollars. Not all of them are chasing the longest payout structure. Not all of them are chasing the perfect buyer either. Understanding the motivations, taking the time to get to know them and their story will help you identify with them and help you connect with them better to make a smoother deal transition and to help get you the best deal possible. Because if the sellers like and trust you, they're going to be more willing to work with you than if they really don't like or trust you. It's just kind of human nature. People want to work with people that they like, and they're going to be willing to do deals with people that they like. I'm not saying that just because they like you, they're going to hand you the business for free, but it's going to be a smoother transition process and maybe better terms than otherwise. Being curious, asking good questions, that's a skill. You can learn it. You can practice it just in your everyday life. But especially when you go into those conversations with the sellers, make sure you're asking good questions, making sure you're listening more than you're talking, especially in the early days, so that you can pick up all the information that you need. Not only about the seller's motivation, but also just about how the business is doing in general. If this resonated with you at all and you're on the path to buying a business, or you are exploring buying a business, or you consider yourself a buyer already, I have a resource on my website called the Buyer's Profile. 15 questions that will help identify where you are in your process so that you can help grow your skills to make yourself even more ready to go out and buy that business. Thanks for watching. Check out that profile, and I will see you again soon. Cheers. Thanks for listening to Business Buying for Financial Independence. If you're serious about owning your time and building long-term wealth, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode.